You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Welcome. It's Friday, and this is your Friday Roundup. To help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan. I'm doing quite well. Yeah, what's going on by you?
I was going to actually let you know that I have been, this whole idea, we talk about it often, design your life. It's kind of cool when you get the opportunity to design what your life will look like. And what's great about that is you notice and observe these friction points, these pain points, and you actually have the space to resolve those. Sometimes it's really complicated resolution. Sometimes it's just simple things. And so for us, we were trying to do all sorts of exercise programs. My wife and I both have committed to exercise, but with two kids, both of them young, it's been somewhat of a challenge to figure out how to fit that in. And I was going to CrossFit for a while with you, and just honestly, between the commute there, the commute back, it was like a 2-hour endeavor. And it was just it was adding a significant amount of friction to our kind of daily flow. And so Danny and I stepped back and said, what would it look like for us to be able to do this in-house, to remove the commute and just be able to do this in our garage? And so we've kind of been working through that problem and figuring out what equipment, what would we need in order for us to both feel comfortable out there working out at the same time with our kids, once they go down for their nap or once they go down at the end of the day. And we have been working towards that. And now we're legitimately doing this 3 times a week together out in the garage, kind of at the end of the day. And while I've always loathed and despised the idea of going to the gym at 5 o'clock, it just causes anxiety as you imagine the lines of people on the treadmill that you're wading your way through just to get a workout in. This is actually incredibly relaxing.
Yeah, Jonathan, I have to say, when I walk in the garage, I've got a little bit of envy here. The garage is amazing. It's kind of cool to look at. What do you want your ideal life to look like? Or maybe what does your ideal life look like in this season of your life? Maybe the ideal life is going to CrossFit 3 or 4 times a week, you and Danny. But right now, with the 2 young kids, it seemed to be adding a lot of stress in your life.
That's exactly it. And season of life is the way to put that. And then to figure out what you can do in the context of that season. And yes, CrossFit it wasn't quite working. I could see it was adding stress. I always felt like I was asking for a favor if I were going to cut out for 2 hours to go do this, or vice versa. Danny would go do the workout and then she would race home as quickly as possible so it didn't put as much stress on me, and vice versa. So again, this season, to be able to adapt to that and recognize it and then work within the confines of those limitations, but not say, well, because we can't do CrossFit, we're not going to do anything.
Right. And clearly this obviously has nothing to do with CrossFit in and of itself. It just has to do with it's 2 hours of your day. Whereas you can just go down to your garage now, even you and Danny, while the kids are napping, and work out for 30 or 40 minutes. You don't need to drive 10 minutes back and forth, get there early for a class. You can just walk downstairs. So yeah, it adds a lot of convenience. And while you obviously invested some money in this, and you have over a number of years, I think you probably spent a couple $100 on maybe mats and some other equipment recently, but that is well worth it, in my opinion. And for me, what's interesting actually is that the exact opposite has been true for us most recently.
So jealous. Try not to be jealous. I'm so jealous.
So I have to say, I am so incredibly impressed with my wife, Laura, recently. She has actually decided to dedicate herself to going back to the gym. And it actually happens that it is the same CrossFit that we go to. She was basically looking forward to this season of her life. Right? We're obviously at a very different stage than you guys. Our kids are in elementary and middle school. And Laura, while she spends a lot of time doing the treasurer of the PTA job and such, everything's kind of in a groove. And she was looking for something a little bit differently. And she wasn't sure that she would like CrossFit at all. But she has jumped into this like nobody I've seen.
Your attendance rate has gone up dramatically since she started going.
Yes. She goes now probably 4+ times a week, Jonathan. It's amazing. And she just loves it. It's so cool. And yeah, you're absolutely right. She's making me be a better person there. And most importantly, it's this fun thing that we can do together. I think you pointed out a couple weeks ago on her Facebook page, she had this amazing post that still just kind of gives me the chills. And she was saying, it was on our anniversary. And she was saying, of our 14-year marriage, these last 3 months have really been the best. It's amazing to think about that. But when I really think it's true, I mean, from August through now, our lives just feel slightly better. It's because, again, you talked about designing your life. What do we want our lives to look like? I think we're really getting there. It's taken a while. It's even down to the travel, right? We determined that while travel in and of itself is great, jumping around from place to place wasn't something that we were looking forward to. So we happened to go to Hawaii, but ultimately the destination doesn't matter. But we stayed in one particular location. We unpacked, we relaxed. We had this amazing family time for 3 weeks. And then when we came back here, we've started up this CrossFit. We're going out to Friday night happy hours as like a date night now that my mom lives here and can babysit the girls. So it's just a couple little tweaks, but it has made such an improvement in our overall level of well-being and happiness that it's really cool. And this is a journey. All of life. It's an experiment and a journey. You never know what is going to light you up until ultimately you figure it out. And it's trial and error. I would have thought that jet setting around the world would have been something that would have interested me. I really genuinely would have, but it's not that. It's the little things. It's the routines. It's the spending time for me, with loved ones, doing things we enjoy. And it's really cool.
And I think speaking of season of life, one thing to point out is, and there's a saying out there, and it's not a particularly good one. And it's, so often your career gets the best and your loved ones get the rest, right? They get the scraps that are left over. And if that's the case, obviously you need to address that in some capacity, but at the same time, recognize there are seasons of life where you do really have to lean into various things. At that point, you're certainly hoping for at least some level of balance, right? So that statement isn't as true. But if you can progressively work towards something like financial independence, and you get that power that continually comes back to your side of the court, you can start making unreasonable demands on the other side, right? To say, I need to carve back something. I would like to create this remote working situation for myself. I'd like to be able to set up something where I'm not spending 18 hours a week commuting back and forth. That's just not sustainable for me and my family. That is the time I would give my family. That doesn't work for me right now. And then as you claim that bandwidth, what does it look like to not just allow that to be sucked into the void and to drift, but then to apply that back to your family and your loved ones? And that conversation is valuable. What does it look like to design this future together? And maybe it's something really, really big. Maybe it's something small, like just working out together, engaging in some level of fitness program together, cooking, making your meals together. There's tertiary benefits that come with not only the relationship that's formed when you and your partner are making meals together, but also the health benefits that come along with that can meet towards your goals. So having these sorts of conversations are really cool. And I think it's a great way to start getting buy-in from your significant other when you're talking about what is this life that you want to build together. It doesn't always need to be a money conversation. It doesn't always need to be a spend less conversation. Sometimes it's truly just, we get this one life, but at the same point, we hit new seasons every week, every month, every year. And as we realize that we're evolving from our current stage to our next stage, what do we want to buy into together?
Yeah, and Jonathan, this is interesting because it's not just steady state all the time. Life has ebbs and flows, ups and downs, and you have to just accept that and roll with it. And I found that this week, actually, in particular. So we have been, and it's been great. We've been exceptionally busy. We spent about 15 plus hours recording video for our brand new 5101 course. And we're going to talk about that, obviously, in a minute here. But even though I'm financially independent and theoretically have all the time, this has been a stressful week. It's funny because Laura has quite literally in the last 7 calendar days been to the gym 5 times.
Wow.
And I've been 0. I feel this little bit of anxiety. I'm busy. We had to, work late yesterday and that's okay. I have to say, I am not as stressed about it as I probably would have been, maybe even a couple months ago. Last night when we got home from recording, I was spent. I was exhausted because it was tiring recording for 7 or 8 hours. But as soon as I just kind of recharged, I felt good. And then we went back and did a couple more hours of work in the evening. And Laura was like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "Honestly, I'm fine. This is just part of life. I'm actually very satisfied with the day. It just felt like a good day, even though we worked probably 10 plus hours." I think that's a cool way of approaching life is everything is not going to be the perfect as I scheduled it day, but you have to roll with that. And we actually found some satisfaction from those couple hours that we did work at night and changed some things on the website that wound up adding, I think, to the user experience and made it a better site. You can always look at things two ways in life. It is what it is. And you can choose to look at it in a positive manner or a negative. I could have looked at it negatively and said, "Oh, grumble, grumble, grumble. I had to spend this time. It took me away from X, Y, and Z," and just looked at it negatively. Or I looked at it positively as we made some positive changes and that was time well spent. And I think just how you approach things mentally in life matters so very much. And obviously, this is one silly little example, but I think the larger point holds that the experience is the experience, but how you choose to react to it is what ultimately matters.
And I think there's actually something even in that, Brad, in that your life is not in a perpetual state of stress, maybe anymore. Maybe you can think to a point where it did just feel like you were getting punched in the face every single day, and your capacity to handle low-level stress was greatly diminished to the point that it would ruin your day, ruin your week. And even that is almost part of the plan. Like where you are now is part of the plan. What can we do to remove the constant low-level stress that we don't even recognize is in our life so that we have that capacity when life does throw us a hard week, throw us a hard event, to be able to handle that in stride without it ruining our relationships with everyone that comes into contact with us? I think there's something there because you've handled all of these small little pain points, consistently looking for pain points in your life and removing them to the point where the character that you say about yourself is that right now, one of the things that frustrates me is I can't figure out what to do with the cinnamon in my kitchen. I don't even know what that means, but I know that that's a pain point that you're trying to work through. So I think that when you can work through some of these more massive things, like the fact that you are truly paycheck to paycheck, that you're trying to figure out how to rob Peter to pay Paul when it comes to your finances and just keep your finances above water from this week to the next. That first time you have a flat tire, your week is ruined. It's devastated. You know that everything breaks. If we can start to build this blueprint, this foundation to get you to steady state, not have to worry. Like what happens when you can start reclassifying what was an emergency as, oh, that's just life. That just happens. It's just life. If you can start raising the bar for what constitutes an emergency, a crisis, or stressful situation. Wow, I ran out of oxygen.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen very often. A stressful situation, then immediately your capacity to handle the buffets of life will increase as well. And I think will also, along with it, bring you some peace of mind that is deserved and in many cases earned, because it doesn't happen by accident. You have to make very intentional steps. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions. In order to get this somewhat easier life, you're going to have to make hard decisions now, but it's worth it. You look back and you say, wow, that was worth it.
I think we have a new episode title for this roundup: what to do with the cinnamon in your kitchen. If you are Googling this, you are not going to find the answer here. But hopefully that's the biggest problem you have. Things are going well.
Well, exactly. One, yes. But then two, maybe we can find out the answer here. Brad, what is the context behind the cinnamon? I've heard you give this analogy twice in public forums.
Yes, embarrassingly so. So it was to illustrate the example of looking for those marginal gains in life, right? We talk about the aggregation of marginal gains, trying to get 1% better in every little aspect of your life and looking for tiny little pain points that you can fix once that will make your life better forevermore. Now, this doesn't mean, again, looking for negative things in life. It just means you're looking for things to improve if you can. So clearly, it goes without saying that once the audience hears this, you guys might think a little bit less of me, but you obviously are looking for the massive things first, right? When you get down to optimizing your cinnamon, you know things are pretty good. But essentially what happened here is Laura and I, for a number of months, and Laura still does, we made a smoothie for each of us in the morning as our breakfast, okay? And again, aggregation of marginal gains, keep this in mind, is we were constantly scrambling through the utensil drawer for a quarter teaspoon. I kid you not, a quarter teaspoon, because this is what we're putting in cinnamon into the smoothie each day. And it was just one of those things that's annoying. And I knew I would have to do this 365 days a year for the next X number of decades, essentially, right?
Your life was one giant prison of emotion.
Yes. Oh, it's horrible. But so what I did was looking for just a simple way to improve. Now, when we wash these quarter teaspoons, and we have 3 or 4 of them, they get put into one particular spot in the utensil drawer. And we don't have to go in there and wade through this every day and try to find this dopey quarter teaspoon. It's right there. So it's kind of like, to quote Jocko Willink, it's discipline equals freedom. We set up this one tiny little discipline that those quarter teaspoons go in this one particular spot, and then it's just there. You don't have to think about it. I know it sounds silly, but just that tiny little improvement has made our lives better in this little way.
And I want to point something out. Our audience is very familiar with this idea now that you spend less than 10 minutes a month on your finances. What are you going to do with all that free time? Well, you're certainly not going to use it scrambling around to try to find the cinnamon scooper. Another example, what this does is we're talking about eliminating decision fatigue at some level here. When you see friction point, how many of us, and this is a familiar idea to many people in the audience, not because of Choose FI, but we've seen this in other places. You go to your closet and you can't figure out what to wear. And there's actually a low level stress that comes from that. So Steve Jobs famously resolved this by having one outfit, right? And we've seen other examples since then. This is actually one of the ideas behind the minimalist wardrobe, the capsule wardrobe. You never go to a closet and don't know what you're going to wear because you only have in there the things that are your favorites. You're always wearing your favorite. It's another example of reducing or eliminating decision fatigue in your life. And again, you don't necessarily start there, but if you can use that framework to every aspect of your life, reclaim that bandwidth and apply that to solving another problem, at some point, you do realize, wow, things just got easy. Okay, so we have a couple announcements. One of them we just mentioned. We finished recording the FI 101 series. We already had over 1,000 people go through the beta course, give us their feedback. These videos that we created are a direct response to do a better job on our end presenting some of these ideas. So thank you to everyone that went through the course and was active in giving us your feedback, both positive and not so positive. All of that was incredibly helpful. This episode that we did with Brian and Sun Wu talking about hacking the FAFSA, really understanding what goes into the free application for federal student aid, that formula. I've heard some feedback already and I've heard additional questions. There's enough there that we want to make sure we're actually collating all of that information and bringing it together to do effectively an AMA style episode regarding what we may have missed. If you remember, we've actually done 2 episodes now. 2 or 3 episodes really talking about this college game plan. Brian, that first episode, I believe it was 114. Brad will check that for me. And this most recent one was Sun Wu that we're doing the roundup for today, episode 154. Brad confirmed, I got it right. Now, if you listen to both of those episodes and you have additional questions, you can send them to feedback@choosefi.com. We will put all of those together. We'll look for the common themes and patterns. And in 2020, we will do an additional episode, probably going into the application season to try to hit some of those big ones to make sure that we're giving you as much information as possible. We'll also try to put together a resource with some of the big takeaways from those 2 episodes and give it to you as well if you're on our email list so that you have that as well going into the season. There is a lot of money to be saved when you don't automatically assume that student loans are necessary. Lots of money. Okay. The last thing I wanted to say, huge announcement with regards to the Playing with Fire documentary. This was a documentary that has been 2 to 3 years in the making. It is one that has been supported the entire way by the financial independence and the Choose FI community. There was a screening tour across the country. Well over 10,000 people purchased tickets to go watch it. But at that point, really, you had to go to a screening in order to be able to see it. As of this week, this documentary is now available as a rental on all the major platforms, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and Vimeo. We'll have links for all those respective spots. You can go to choosefi.com/PWF. I'm not even going to attempt. I'm not going to attempt the military phonetical alphabet. I should have if I had gotten ahead of it. We can come back to it. Brad, do you have it?
No, I do not have it. But yeah, that's Playing with Fire. So PWF.
All right, cool. I want to say one other thing here. So first of all, with these rentals, please rent it. Please rent it as a way of showing support. Please rent it as a way of sharing it with friends and family. And then the other thing that renting this documentary will do is it'll actually signify to the world that there is significant interest in this concept. It'll make it easier for the crew that created this documentary to get access to larger platforms like Netflix, et cetera. So if you really want to see this get mainstream, if you really want to, you guys know that the Netflix algorithm is the key to this entire thing. So Netflix needs to know that there's significant demand. And in order for them to really want to promote it, you can really put your stamp and say that I think this should be a recommendation on Netflix by renting it now. So let's do our best to support them. And I think $4.99, $5.99 for a rental is an amazingly cost-effective way to do that. All right, now we actually have a pretty cool segment teed up for you today. One of the amazing things about being on this journey with you is that it truly is a journey, and where you were last year is different than where you are today. And that applies to you on your individual journey. It also applies to the guests that we've had on this show. Back in episode 79, we interviewed Tim and Amy from Go With Less. That was episode 79 of our podcast. And in that episode, they were actually sharing with us their plans for doing some travel around the world in this vehicle they used of house sitting, but it was always a temporary thing because they had kids that were aging into college and they were kind of in this trance to talk about season of life. They had anchors to this specific geographic location. And at the end of that episode, Brad asked them, would you ever consider just doing this full time? It seems like this is your passion. And they said, no. Well, it turns out that was Inception right there. That was the seed. And they came back and they told us that we are actually going to go to travel full time. And we want to come share with your audience all the steps that we've made, exactly what our plans are. And this conversation coming up is incredibly valuable. As you start thinking about your season of life and you say nothing's off the table, what do we want it to look like? This is a conversation that I promise you is going to light you up. So with that, Tim and Amy, welcome back to the Choose FI podcast.
Thank you. We love being back. Thanks so much.
All right. So Inception, is that accurate? Did Brad plant a seed?
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Brad did see what was possible for us. So we didn't have a seed. And not only did he ask if we said no, we said, heck no, no way. We love being home. We said we love being home as much as we love being on the road. And we had no intention whatsoever to not have a home base. And that all changed.
One of the things we also talked about in that episode was the fact that we were about to go on a summer trip to Europe, and we were planning to be there for 2 weeks. And our daughter decided that she was going to go to camp and work at camp for the entire summer. And that allowed us to be in Europe for 9 weeks. And so we were there for 9 weeks. At the end of that 9 weeks is really when we decided that this is something we think we'd like to do full time.
So what was it that made you feel comfortable with the idea of full-time travel? I mean, there's a lot of like barriers that I would imagine, that sense of stability, that cadence of life, people have to work through different things. And for you said full-time travel is it. We want to do this. Like what kind of got you there?
Actually, I'm even going to back up a little bit because it was even before our trip was over that we decided to make the leap. So I am the one who plans everything we're going to do whenever we're traveling. So we were gone for 63 days and I had us in Budapest and Krakow, Poland and Prague and Vienna, Berlin, all around Europe, all these capitals. And we were spending 3 to 5 days in each one of these humongous, phenomenal cities. And what I realized as I was planning the trip right after we recorded our podcast episode is we're just scratching the surface in these places. And Tim and I really wanted to dig a little deeper. We didn't want to be hustling like our plan was calling for us to be hustling. So I said, honey, and we couldn't leave the city either. So I wanted to take all these day trips. We didn't have time to do that because there was just too much. I said, there's so much of the world to see. Why are we ever going to come home as a home base? I look at it like the game of tag. So when you're on home base, you're not really having all the fun. For us, all the fun is out running around off home base. And home base is when you're waiting to be running and having all the fun. So I just looked at him. I said, honey, we don't have all the time in the world to do the things that we want to do. Let's cut out our home base and travel full time. This was nothing that we had ever talked about. Tim looked at me and said, let's do it. He's the easiest man. So
Tim is on the team.
There you go.
He's on the team. So then what made us comfortable about losing our home? I'm going to be so honest. I don't know that I am comfortable about losing our home, but we're doing it anyway.
What does this look like practically? I think so many of us, we do have that comfort in the home base. But I mean, we have stuff, even if you downsize, like practically speaking, what are the steps that need to occur to sell where you live? And I mean, what do you do with your stuff? Do you sell all of it? I mean, are you keeping certain aspects? Are you digitizing things? Talk me through like even just the nuts and bolts of what does this look like?
So we're gonna have a 5x5 storage unit, and that's all the space we're gonna have for keeping our stuff. So we're getting rid of all of our furniture. We're also intending to get rid of we have one remaining car. We had 2 cars, I think, when we spoke with you last year. We're gonna get rid of that one remaining car. So we're currently in our townhome. We did this downsizing exercise about 4 years ago when we moved out of our big house. And so we got rid of a lot of stuff then. We still have a lot of stuff now. It's actually sort of surprising the amount of stuff that we still have in our life. So as we're going through this exercise, Amy likes to say that, so the stuff that we got rid of 4 years ago was sort of the easy stuff. And now the things that we have left in our life are things that we treasure a little more. And so we are digitizing parts of our life. We're taking pictures of our pictures and things like that. However, some of that stuff is going to remain in storage, with the idea being that we would eventually digitize that stuff or get rid of the rest of it. But it is an interesting process. So I was going through, Amy and I did a YouTube show a week or so ago where Amy went through talking about the emotional side of this for her. So she's really struggled with some of the stuff. If we can find a good home for stuff, it's on the easier side. But if we give stuff away and it's given to the wrong folks or just doesn't feel right, it makes it really hard. And I pretty much said, it's not so hard for me. This is easy for me. And then I started digging through my stuff. Just this last week, we were in Denver at a house sit there. And I was looking through my Boy Scout collection that I've had since I was 10 years old. So this is patches and badges and books and things like this. And most of it I haven't had such a hard time getting rid of. But this stuff, it struck a chord with me as I was going through this and giving it away. And ultimately, I did just give this stuff away. And I found somebody on Craigslist who said they were interested in it. And hopefully it found a good home. But it's challenging.
You know, it's interesting to think about. You went through this exact example, but honestly, this does force you to become aware of what you do actually value. You know, like you would have never even looked at those. They would have just sat in luggage and storage for 40 years, you know, like this is when you were a kid. And now suddenly, as you're getting rid of it, you suddenly are like being presented with, many cases, memories or little bits of treasures. And you're actually having the chance to say, oh, wow, this meant something to me for a long period of time. I'm curious. You guys have reached financial independence, and you could probably travel on pretty any reasonable budget, but you stumbled onto this idea of house sitting a long time ago and have really cultivated this skill set, and it's allowed you to do what most people could only dream of at a fraction of the cost. And I'm curious, how much do you anticipate a year of travel to cost you using this vehicle? And then we can dive into what this vehicle actually is after that.
Okay, I'll take that on. I'm going to say we spend roughly $36,000 to $40,000 a year in our fire life, and it just naturally works out that way. We can spend more than that. We just naturally end up at about $36,000 to $40,000. And even though we own our townhome outright, we still pay about $1,000 a month for it, with the property taxes and the home insurance, the utilities, things like that. Our HOA fees, it's about $1,000 a month. And we realized we have been traveling for well over 100 days each of the past 2 years, and we're just having these carrying costs of this home, and we don't have family locally. So it's kind of a pain to have a home that no one's living in and needs to check on. So, and we don't have pets, we don't have plants, we don't have anything. We're in a townhome community, so they take care of the outside. So it didn't make sense for us to keep this home because of the cost, really, is what it comes down to. But what we're expecting is to be spending less when we're traveling on the road. Now, it will depend upon which countries we choose. So we're going to be in some very, very expensive places in 2020. We're going to be in Scotland and in England. We're going to be in Provence, France, all on house sits. We're going to be in Berkeley, California, Maui. We're hoping to finalize something in Maui as a house sit. So these are some of the most expensive places in the world. And we are looking to live in these places. Our annual budget, we track it all on our YouTube channel, and time will tell, but we're thinking that it's probably going to be somewhere in the 30,000s, 30 to 40,000. Time will really tell that at the end.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because I know you, Amy, have been corresponding with my brother Scott, who him and his wife Kristen they basically have been traveling the world since June. They took a sabbatical year from their international teaching, and I know they've used this house sitting to great benefit. I know they've done it at least in Zurich, Switzerland, which is got to be at or near the top of the most expensive places, right? Like, yes. And it's a win-win for the homeowner and for obviously the house sitter who's getting this place for free. So it's been really cool.
We say it's a win-win-win, actually. So first, there's no money in this. This isn't a side hustle, and we're not charging anything. So the homeowner gets vetted, experienced house sitters that don't charge anything. Second, we have a wonderful place to stay, so it's free accommodations. But the super biggest third win is for the pets. Pets hate kennels, is what we found from most of our homeowners. Ours sure did when we had pets. So having the pets keep their routine, and we don't have jobs when we're there. We don't have kids to take care of. So our job is to love up on the pets, and we say that it's like their vacation when their owners are away. So it's win-win-win is how we look at it.
All right, well, let's talk about that, because you said experienced house sitters, but someone's listening to this. This is quite literally the first time they've even heard that. They are the opposite from house sitters, the experienced house sitters. So what does it look like for someone to get that first bit of experience? What's the game plan here, and where can this take you?
So something that we did when we first were introduced to house sitting is that we started doing local sits to get references. Basically, we were building our resume. Amy likes to say that right now is a perfect time to start building your resume, because during holiday season with Thanksgiving here in the States and then the Christmas season, there's an overage of available sits. And so it's a little bit easier to get involved with sitting this time of the year, because if you're a newbie, homeowners may be looking for somebody and they need to find somebody. And so now's a great time to get into house sitting if you're interested. But doing the local sits is a great way to build your resume. And that's what we did early on, and it worked out great for us.
So to your point, you're getting these local sits. Are you using like a vetted platform for this? Because you're talking about getting local references. Like mechanically, the person hears this and they want to get started. What is like the 80-20 of building this house sitting resume?
So we use the biggest site in the world. It's called Trusted House Sitters, but there are all kinds of regional specific. There's US only, there's UK only, there's Australia only, there's things that are more predominant in France, for example. But we use the biggest one in the world. It's also, because it is the biggest, the most competitive. Like I said, it's called Trusted House Sitters, but we found many short sits in the Denver area. And while we were waiting for our children to leave the nest, we were already fire. We took advantage of that time to build that quote unquote resume. And we did a whole bunch of shorter sits so that we're vetted. Again, it's an important thing when you're coming in to take care of someone's home and pets. The homeowner often wants to know that their belongings and their beloved pets are in good hands. So what we would do is we would go and meet them in person, because we could do that as locals.
So now, of the next, let's say, roughly year or so that you're going to be traveling, what percentage of that do you think will be these house sits? So essentially getting your housing for free.
We're hoping that it's somewhere between 75 and 80%. We're not sure. We have friends that do this we believe they do it 100% of the time. I don't think it's quite 100%, but they do it a large percentage of the time. Something else I wanted to circle back with that Amy mentioned earlier, sort of this slow versus fast travel model. So I think that the Europe trip, even though we might have made a decision that we think we want to sell our house and maybe do this full time, the Europe trip where we were there for 9 weeks really drove it home for us. Specifically, when we were at the house sit, we were in a French house sit for how long, Abe? A month. And so being there for a month is really what drove it home for us, that we really like this slow travel model. And slow travel versus fast travel is again, you're out of place for a longer period of time, and you're not paying the cost of getting from place to place to place. So it's not only cost effective, but we prefer it. We just like being in a place for a longer period of time. And house sitting lends itself to this tremendously. And like Amy said, we believe that we're going to spend less money in our full-time travel life than we do in our current paid off townhome situation.
And I'd like to piggyback on something that Tim just said. The reason why it isn't even a higher percentage is because I think we're going to want to throw in some Airbnbs and hotels, because when you're house sitting, you're not like a normal traveler. You're not in Paris and you're out for 12 or 16 hours a day seeing the sights. You have a pet at home. So you're kind of chilling at home a little bit more. We cook a lot. As a matter of fact, we had a house sit in another region of France just this past summer. In 5 weeks, we didn't go out to eat one single time, but that was a choice. We had such amazing groceries at the markets and the farmers markets, and their stores are so fantastic and their groceries are wonderful. We loved eating at home. So we're not out doing the touristy things. And when we want to go do the touristy things, that's when we'll have an Airbnb or use our points and miles for hotels.
You know, I love that you said do the touristy things, because I think that most of us intuitively know, mostly because of marketing, how to do the touristy things. It makes sense. You have the billboards, you do that. But how do you not do the touristy things? What's your game plan going on? We want to live here for a month. To some degree, we want to get to know the community. You know, like there's some aspects of this that it's different than just going and getting the paid tour guide, right?
100%. And I think that Airbnb was such a game changer because people like the more local feel. But now that we've done house sitting, turns out that Airbnb is a lot closer to a hotel than to a local feel. So when we are house sitting, we're taking the dog for walks every single morning. We're out taking, and that's not always dogs. It's often cats, bunnies we've done horses. Generally, most house sits are pet sits. So this is for people who love animals generally. But I say we're trying on someone else's life. So people in their normal life aren't out doing sightseeing tours every day in their normal life. They're just cooking dinner at home and maybe binging on Netflix when they have free time. We're working on our videos and maybe our blog soon to come, things like that. And it gives us an opportunity to kind of relax. So we are healthier when we're house sitting because, again, we're doing a lot of walking with the dogs. We're just taking it a little bit easier. And we'll see, Tim and I aren't taking it easier kind of people. So it will be interesting to see how this goes this first year. And we might want to be throwing in a lot more of that hustle around touring sort of thing. But I think the real key here is being flexible and adaptable. That's how we changed our original plan, is that we are flexible. So we're going to go with the flow and see how it goes. And if we're bored, then we will not be bored for very long. But it allows us to go meet the community. We meet the neighbors often, even in places where English isn't the predominant language. We find a way.
Yeah, I love that phrase. We're trying on someone's life, which is kind of a cool way of looking at it. And I suspect, who knows, maybe at some point you might stay at one of these house sits and realize, oh, wow, this is the perfect place for us. Maybe we do at some point in the future want to settle down again. And I actually wanted to dive into the numbers real quick. So bear with me here. I'm just thinking through this as like a thought experiment. So you said your life previously cost about $40,000. Now that's including travel, obviously, but also this roughly $1,000 a month for your home. And you said even though it was paid off. So I guess what I'm thinking is this is actually going to be an even bigger swing because realistically, if that home is paid off, you have a significant amount of home equity that you can now invest, right? So obviously I have no sense of what your property is worth, but even I don't know, $200,000 if you're assuming an 8% return. And of course, that's not a straight line linear thing every year. I mean, we're talking $16,000 a year in income, in essence, that's now freed up. So not only do you not have that outgoing $12,000 a year from these miscellaneous costs that invariably add up, but now you're actually taking that equity that was sitting there, essentially doing nothing, and you're getting an income stream from it. So, I mean, have you guys really dove into the numbers? Like, I see this as a financial bonanza for you.
I don't think we could have said it better than you just said it, Brad. So you hit the nail on the head. So that's pretty much our thought process as well. In terms of the numbers themselves and sort of working through them and the details, I can't speak to that specifically, but everything that you just said is exactly our thought process. And that when we're on the road, we sort of have this, number one, our money's in the bank, hopefully until the recession happens, making us a nice return. And then we have $1,000 a month to sort of spend towards our travels. Some of the folks that do the house sitting gig, like they need to be in a home. They don't have the luxury to have to be in an Airbnb or to afford to be in an Airbnb. We have that luxury in our life because of our fire lifestyle. So if a house sit, for instance, falls apart, no big deal. We'll just go stay in an Airbnb or we'll go to a hotel. We have points and miles. It's also free for us to get from place to place to place unless we're on a bus. If we're on a plane, that's going to be a free thing for us. But we're typically taking trains and buses when we are in Europe. And also something else I wanted to circle back to is we currently have about 100 days booked of next year, like already on the books in house sits. So those are free nights, free electricity, free internet, free. However, this is one of the pitfalls of house sitting is that we are booked in a sit in Orlando that's scheduled to start in April. And they reached out to us yesterday and said they're having some challenges with their pet. Their pet may pass. And so it looks like that 6 weeks that we have on the books is now going to fall apart. So we've got to figure out what we're going to do. So I think that again lends itself to the flexibility that we have with our fire lifestyle. It's a bummer that may fall apart. However, we're going to make it work and we'll figure out what's going to happen next.
I'd love to talk about the transition in healthcare. So you both are retired from corporate America and you're here in the United States. Now, prior, you were spending about 100 days a year traveling. So that tells me that you would need to make sure you have healthcare inside the United States. I'm curious, as an individual couple that's controlling their income, what was healthcare costing you now? And then what do you anticipate most of this? Now you're dramatically cutting how much time you're inside the States, and there's all sorts of options. It's depending on the country, depending on whether or not you're getting international travel insurance, this kind of a la carte menu. What do you think it'll be for the next year?
This is a fantastic question. And along with the house sitting questions that we get from your audience after our interview, the healthcare is gigantic. So I'm going to take half of that and Tim's going to talk about the other half. But it is important. What we did not know, we were on an ACA plan. And for the first 2 years of our retirement, that was back in 2015, we didn't know that that did not cover us outside of Colorado. And we were doing a lot of travel. And so at the end of 2 years, we learned that we did not have coverage that we thought that we had, which was a big eye opener, and we adjusted immediately as a result. But now we have 2 different kinds of health plans for this past year, and that will change every January. What we find is in fire, we change our healthcare every single year pretty much because things change so quickly, not only with our financial and tax situation, but with the plans that are offered. So we are currently on Liberty Health Shares. And even though we're only planning to be in the United States for 2 months a year, international traveling 10 months a year, I am planning to maintain Liberty Health Shares because I do not have any pre-existing conditions. Tim has a huge pre-existing condition that is not going to be covered ever on Liberty Health Shares. And that really messes up our options for healthcare. So he'll get into that, as I said. But getting onto something like the Liberty Health Shares with no pre-existing conditions is kind of key. And I don't think I'm really ever going to let it go, even though I don't know that I'll be using much of it. We'll come back every November for doctor's appointments, but it's just there so that when we do come back, I have a plan that allows me to pay normal rates without being excluded from other conditions that I may develop in the next decade or so.
So my pre-existing condition is I had back surgery 3 years ago. I had a herniated disc, and that has pretty much made it completely unaffordable for me to get another, or I shouldn't say unaffordable. I can't choose anything else outside of the ACA because they all exclude my back, my spine completely. And so they have exclusion periods that are sometimes we won't cover you ever, or an exclusion period of 5 years or something like this. And so if I had an issue with my spine, it wouldn't be covered by pretty much any plan other than the ACA plan that I currently have. So I'm sort of stuck with the ACA. And this includes expat plans. So something we've considered is, as we're looking at expat plans, they seem to be affordable. It's just, again, if my back's excluded, they're really not a good option for us. But something we've also considered is that doing the medical tourism thing is like finding a place in the world where I could have my spine worked on if I had an issue. The problem is we don't know what that looks like. You can't pick up the phone and call Singapore and say, hey, what's a back surgery going to cost in Singapore? It may be $50,000 there, just like it's $50,000 here, but I don't know how to have that conversation. So as we're exploring the world, we're thinking about trying to figure out what that looks like, just paying out of pocket in some place to deal with my spine issues. And if we find an affordable option, we may do away with the ACA potentially for me and just plan on paying out of pocket, but doing things, if it's my spine related, in another part of the world. So it's really a difficult thing for us to work through.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to just circle back. So right now you do have ACA insurance and you have this herniated disc, this spinal issue that's ongoing. Based on what you were saying, you don't know that you need to have a surgery done. Are you? Because if you didn't know it needed to be done, could you not just do it while you're on the ACA here? I mean, just work me through kind of that.
That is a fantastic question. Question couldn't be more timely. So I am experiencing some new back pain. So again, this happened 3 years ago. After the surgery, I had this lingering sort of sensation in my leg that I would say I could just sort of still feel the nerve. And now it's getting to a point where I think I have pain again. And so we certainly could keep the ACA insurance. The thing is that the ACA insurance isn't necessarily affordable. So our plan, with the way that we can control our income and our fire lifestyle, we get subsidies and we can keep our income really low. When we sell our house this next year, we're going to have a large capital gain. That's going to wipe away any subsidy that we might have from an ACA perspective. So next year, we're paying out of pocket for whatever the ACA is going to cost us. And so I think for me alone, that's going to be about $700 a month with a $2,500 deductible. And what we're hoping is that we could possibly deal with my issue if I have an issue early in the year, and then potentially change to a different plan because we're planning to move to Texas or we're going to domicile in Texas. And maybe bring the cost down by making this move after I've already dealt with my back issue. But again, this is an ongoing challenge. And like Amy said, we think every January we're going to have to sort of resort through this and figure out, what we're going to do. I think that international coverage is something that ultimately is going to be the right answer for us. But until we get out and sort of experience what that looks like, or international coverage or paying out of pocket internationally is something that we're going to consider. But until we get out and start looking at that, we don't know what that's going to look like.
And I realize it's something you are working through, but I just wanted to, as an intellectual exercise, I'm just thinking through this myself. And like in the context of, I don't know if that's going to be a $50,000 surgery or not, internet, whatever. You don't know. I don't know how to have the conversation. It seems like even with you do have the ACA plan. You know the constraints. You got this 2,500. Like it sounds like it would be some fraction of that. It might be this is the year of sorting the back type deal. Like we got to lean into it this year. And yeah, it's going to be really, really expensive. All the subsidies are going to go away. But this is something along those lines. And so to your point, life is fluid, time is fluid. But it is nice that although it is maybe not perfectly optimized, like it's a cost that you can bear and you do have insurance.
100%. So it's certainly, we just don't want to bear the cost. Right. I don't want to pay $12,000 a year to have this in the picture. It's better. We currently, with our subsidies, we pay $14 a month for our coverage, and we each have a $6,000 deductible. That's our this year's plan.
That's on our ACA plan. Then the Liberty is, I think it's $350 a month with a fairly low deductible. I believe that's about $1,500 or so for the two of us. So that's very, very affordable. And I think we spend much more than we need to on our health insurance. And it's just because it could wipe us out if we have some sort of an issue, big issue, more than the back surgery.
Our spending is like a game to us. And so if we have to spend $12,000 on our coverage, then that just feels like we're losing at the game. Does it fit into our numbers? Certainly it does, but it doesn't feel like we're winning if I have to pay that amount of money for coverage.
What's funny, what's interesting about this conversation and the reason we've kind of stayed here is that this is a very realistic look. With as ridiculous as we have it here in the United States, it's a relatively optimistic look. I think so many people come at it from a place of fear and almost like, oh, what can I do? And we don't look at it. And the realities are, you do have options. This is a solvable problem. Depending on how you want to do it, as long as you know the rules, you can come to a conclusion, whether it be a combination of health share, taking advantage of the subsidies where they're available, paying full freight in the worst case scenario. Like, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you using your personal example as an opportunity to help our audience think through like what this might realistically look like. I mean, you didn't choose the back issue, but now that you have this, here's what it looks like to have the luxury of being able to control your income. And here are the variables that are at play with what you actually end up doing.
And there's this financial piece, but if you consider that we're not going to be staying in one place for very long, that adds a whole other level. So you don't just walk into a clinic in Berlin and say, I need back surgery. That's not how it works. So when Tim had his surgery 3 years ago, it was in Denver. They exhaust everything before you get to surgery. You do physical therapy and acupuncture, cortisone shots, chiropractic, all of that before surgery. And sometimes then there's a long wait for the surgeon to even book you. So we're not staying put for very long. And that adds another level of complexity. But if nothing else, we are good at rolling with the punches. And I really think that when we've left our corporate jobs, I think that we have to be that way. So if things change, whether it's with our health or our finances or really anything, being adaptable. A lot of people on our channel, the comments say like, well, what happens if this happens and this happens and this happens? We're going to have to adapt. And thankfully, we're both on the same page and we do have options, as you mentioned. So this is things that it might not be the best and cheapest option, but we do have options.
All right, guys, before we close up, just one question I had. This is the CPA in me. I can't help myself here. You said before that you're going to have a large capital gain when you sell your house, right? And that's going to affect your ACA subsidies. But my initial thought is for a married couple, you get a $500,000 exemption. So just based on what I know about you, I don't think that you're bumping up on that. But what are we talking about here? Like, why is this going to hit your tax return when you realistically get this huge exemption?
Two parts to the question. So number one, this was a rental property. And so we're going to have to pay federally, we will have to pay a percentage of our capital gain from a federal tax standpoint. So I think we're expecting to have about $100,000 worth of capital gain. I think we lived in the house about half the time. So my understanding in terms of years, and Brad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is that we're going to owe taxes, I think it's 15% on about half of that gain. So we're going to owe taxes on $50,000. But my understanding from an ACA standpoint is it is a completely different deal than federal taxes. So the fact that we had this capital gain, I know this is true of capital gains, normal capital gains, is that you have to, it's a separate exercise. And so the fact that we have $100,000 worth of capital gain from the sale of the property means that we had $100,000 worth of income from an ACA subsidy standpoint. And I think it's going to totally wipe out our subsidy. We will not have any subsidy next year because of the capital gain from the sale of our property.
For you guys, where's that subsidy cliff? Like, what's the dollar amount at which sends you over that cliff?
So there are two sides to the cliff. There's the bottom where I think it's about $20,000 a year worth of income where you would have to be on Medicaid if you didn't make more than that. And I think the top is around $70,000.
65, 70 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all very, very interesting. I think we'll probably have to get Sean Mullaney, the FI tax guy, to weigh in here, and maybe we can have you back on
Friday roundup for our Friday roundup.
I mean,
the plot thickens.
Yeah, because this is, the piece of information that stuck out to me there was that when you said it was an investment property. So I suspect that is what changes the game. But sadly, I am out of the CPA game. So
Are you really so sad?
Yeah, I am devastated and distraught on a continual basis. Believe me, but Sean is wonderful. So yeah, we'll run this by Sean and see what he comes back with.
Yeah, we'll provide that feedback as soon as we get it. Now, for our audience that are listening to this, the Friday that this goes live, I believe your house is on the market.
It goes on the market the day this goes live. So please send us good vibes so that we can launch our adventure without the strings of our house weighing us down.
All right. So catch us up on the first couple jump starts on your itinerary. Where are you going? And also tied to that question, where can people find out more about what you guys are doing?
Terrific. So we are, every single Wednesday, we come out with a new video on our YouTube channel. It's called Go With Less, no spaces, and it's LESS. And we are resurrecting our blog on the other side of our home sale. So we'll also be at www.gowithless.com. Now, we go back to a repeat house sit in the town of Berkeley, California, which is a phenomenal town for, as I mentioned in France, food ingredients. It's a great place to go to the grocery stores because they have such amazing produce and foodie things. We're going to be in Maui. We're spending a month in Sonoma. We'll be maybe in Orlando. If we're not in Orlando, then we'll be in Asheville, North Carolina. From there, we sell our car. We head off to house sits in Scotland, in Provence, France. As a matter of fact, the person from Provence, France found us from our YouTube channel and reached out. We'll be in the countryside of England. And I think that's as far as we have scheduled is up through
We have a flight home from Spain. We don't have any plans in Spain, but we have a flight home from Spain.
So we'll probably spend some time in Spain and we'll fly right to FinCon from Madrid.
You know, as you guys cultivate this YouTube channel, you're going to become the world's most in-demand house sitters. You can see it now.
Yeah, things are good. We're happy, and we're happy to share this lifestyle. And here, we're happy to share this lifestyle with your audience. And we don't just want to share it with people who want to be sitters, but also with homeowners. The world needs more homeowners. And again, you can find great house sitters for free to take amazing care of your home. And it's a cool sharing economy sort of a transaction.
I love it. Well, the world just lost one homeowner with Tim and Amy. So we'll see what we can do about that. All right, Tim and Amy, thanks for joining us on the show today. This has been a blast.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. This was fun.
So, Brad, they did it, man. I mean, Inception, that was you. You planted that seed, and look what they're doing now.
Yeah, that is really hard to believe. It's amazing how just one little question or comment like that can make such a difference in someone's life. And yeah, I can't wait to hear how their house sale goes and just how this life really treats them moving forward. It just sounds incredibly exciting. So yeah, huge congrats and good luck to Amy and Tim.
So, MK, let's go ahead and bring you into this conversation, bringing in mailbag questions from the community. What do you got for us?
Well, today we have an update from Rudy. So on the Facebook group, Rudy posted a photo of his fire bowl, and there's one piece of candy in it for each day that he has left before he reaches fire. It looks obviously very delicious. There were some concerns in the comments, though, about how do you just eat one M&M? which can, takes a lot of self-control to only have one. But obviously Rudy is well on his way to fire. So he is crushing that. And the gifts here are just perfect, obviously, of all the candy gifts and all the fire gifts that you can imagine. So way to go, Rudy. We cannot wait to see an update when that fire candy bowl is empty.
Yeah. And MK, this is not a huge bowl of candy here. So it looks like, right, Jonathan?
Oh my goodness.
So yeah,
wow.
It looks like Rudy's within maybe 100 days-ish of just back of the envelope here.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know how he's reaching fire, but I also want to know, how are you just eating one M&M?
Right.
How do you stop yourself?
And I was thinking he should have filled that thing up with Reese's, because Reese's are way less judgmental. There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. Yeah? Yeah, anybody? Courtesy laugh? Somebody? They hooked him. He's out of here. No, this is great. All right, so we have a YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, you absolutely should be. We got a picture of this. We will be sharing it on the YouTube channel. Check it out and use that delicious chocolatey goodness to drive yourself towards financial independence.
All right, MK, what's going on with our local groups?
Well, speaking of delicious chocolate, we have a new local group in Cologne, Germany. And I know Germany is known for delicious chocolates, right? So it all ties in. Welcome.
I was unaware of. So is that a thing?
I feel like if you're that adjacent to Switzerland, you have to have good chocolate. Like Switzerland is the be all end all of chocolate. So then nearby, it must also be good. It is a compliment to the chocolatiers of the world.
Yeah, I'm actually, I Googled Germany known for chocolate, ? And an article comes up here, 5 countries that are famous for chocolate. And Germany is one of them. Very impressive.
There you go.
This new segment brought to you by Google. Let me Google that for you.
That should just be the new name of the podcast.
I hear you. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. We're doing our book, Choosify, your blueprint to financial independence, found anywhere the books are found, or you can win a copy doing this drawing. Just go to choosify.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us a short written review, send us an email to feedback@choosify.com. letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday Roundup. So, MK, how many winners do we have today?
Well, guys, today we have 1 winner, and that is SE, initials, SE, an amazing podcast on fire. I want to express my appreciation for your podcast. I recently discovered your podcast through something I read. I've been a strong follower of another financial podcast in addition to being a graduate of his financial coaching program. However, I found this podcast to be more practical to the everyday listener, an individual that is trying to obtain FI. I also find I can listen and direct people to this podcast without apprehension of others getting offended at what one might say. I appreciate how real the both of you are, and I appreciate how you reference other podcast episodes. That is brilliant. Please keep up the great work. Keep the fire burning.
All right, my friends, if this is the first time that you've listened to a Choosify podcast and a lot of this is going over your head, but you want to start building your blueprint to financial independence, the information builds on itself. You could definitely just start with episode 1. You should subscribe to this on your platform of choice, whether that be YouTube or your podcast. And what I would recommend you do is actually go to choosify.com/start. We have created a free illustrated guide to FI, and in our minds, this would be the easiest way to get started on your path to financial independence. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.